Welcome to the table where silence is a strategy. Timing is a currency, and words can mean and move millions. My name is Nanza, the Executive Director at the ADR Center. Today we talk about negotiations as an art, as an architect. My goal and role and hope is that at the end of this short conversation, I will be able to move the conversation away from the understanding that negotiation is an art of war, or that negotiations are a battlefield. Please stay tuned and let's dive deep into the subject that is negotiations. We are going to discuss the plots, the ploys, the dynamics, the deadlocks, and everything around what makes negotiation a tool that every smart business person, parent, organization, an individual needs to have in their arsenal. Thank you for tuning into the ADR Center series, and we look forward to this interesting and hopefully mind-changing conversation. As mentioned earlier, negotiations is not war. Negotiations is an architect that has nuances, that has dynamics, that has deadlocks. And here, the purpose of this conversation is to unpack the psychology, the power plays, the pressure points, and the quiet genius behind commercial and personal negotiations. In this, we shall deal with the deals themselves, the deadlocks, the dynamics, and how smart negotiators can turn conflict into currency. We will discuss and teach you and give you tips on how to deal with difficult people in negotiations. We do encounter difficult people. How to discuss and negotiate with people who you think, perhaps if they're clients, they're already convinced they can't afford you. How do you negotiate with paranoid people? And on the discussion will go. But first, as we get into this conversation, I would like us to build a frame of reference. And this is how, at the ADR Center, we choose to look at negotiation. If we have agreed thus far that it is not about who wins and who loses, then there has to be something else, a framework based on which that the negotiations must stand. Our frame of reference is in the understanding that when you get into negotiations, the other party has something that you want, and you have something that they want, and the delicate dance now becomes how to give them what they want and build trust in a way that they will see your end goal, in a way that they will reciprocate the goal to give you what you want. Contrary to common belief, it's not me holding my cards close to my chest and hoping that at the end of the day I walk away with everything and the other party walks away with nothing. That is not negotiation. In our understanding, negotiation is when you sit with your team, and as mentioned, because it is architecture in nature, it's an art. You have objectives that you want to achieve, and having understood what you want to achieve, you enter the other party's shoes, and then you try to understand what they might want out of this negotiation. This process typically is facilitated if we are talking about the alternative dispute resolution space by a neutral third party, who we call a neutral in the language of ADR, alternative dispute resolution. They might guide the conversation along, but ultimately do not make any decisions for you. Once the objectives and the goals are clear, it is important that you have a plan, whether it is at individual level, whether it's corporate level, or at project level. What is in this plan? The plan is on the steps that you agree that you will follow without knowing what the other party has. Because by the time you start a negotiation, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns. So your goal, even in navigating the uncertainty for a skilled negotiator, is to problem solve. Half the battle is won if you can identify what the other party on the other side is trying to solve, so that you do the risk and reward combo. It's a game of psychology, but with skilled negotiators, we can work out what the possible windfall is for the other party in any negotiation. Simple example. Your teenager or your young adult wants to drive your car. Let's start at a very basic level. Because sometimes we think negotiation is all about when we have countries at war or tribes at war, or when things are already out of hand. When you understand that in negotiating about the safety of driving and maybe observing homecoming hours with a teenager, you gotta know what is in it for them, what we call a WIFO. Every party to a negotiation has that one thing that when you understand it as a skilled negotiator, it makes it easy to move a step, and they move a step closer to you. As earlier mentioned, negotiation is a dance. It's a delicate dance where you want to find your rhythm while offering something and gaining something in return. The other way to plan and structure negotiations is to have what we call a partner. A partner is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In simple terms, if I don't get what I want, what is the next possible thing I could walk away with to make this a successful negotiation? As we talk about the partner, we need to remember that even in business, the worst deal is not the one you lost, but the one that you structured badly. So coming back to our partner, once you have your best alternative to the negotiated agreement, you are comfortable and confident throughout the negotiation because there's no anxiety around what the outcome will be. You on your side and what you are in control of have a cut-off point. That means that as you negotiate and the other party negotiates with their partner, remember you're not the only one with a negotiation strategy, then is that going to affect us? Okay. Then you know that the partners, when combined, give you what we call a zone of possible agreement, or a ZOPA. Once you have your partner clear, and remember you're not counting on the other party's partner, but your very own position, and you know just by virtue of your experience that we have a partner on the other side, we start to work on the other attributes of a negotiation. Typically, there are 5. There is risk, there is control, there are standards, there is money involved, sometimes there is egos involved, and an end game. An end game is really the outcome. For you to be a skilled negotiator and to win at this negotiation game, you have to understand the risks from both sides. You have to understand who is in control of what is in your control, and what is not. You should be able to have standards that guide your decision making, and some of those standards, among them we've talked about the ZOPA and the partner, where you say beyond a certain thing, this deal is not worth it for me, and then your desired outcome. There's so much we can unpack when it comes to those zones, because like we said, in the architecture of negotiation, you're moving from one end of the spectrum, as is the other party. As you get into that ZOPA, the reality is it's never a smooth game, and sometimes there's a stalemate. In the instance where you have a stalemate, it helps because sometimes negotiations are human facing, their emotions, their egos, their power struggles. It's important for you to know your final offer. And you know that after this, if it is not met, we walk away the all or nothing. In a short while, we are going to discuss the negotiation strategies. We call them ploys and plots, but that's on the negative side. I think they are just strategies and techniques that once you learn them, help you to be a better negotiator. A little more about the part where you say, this is my cutoff point. Please have that in mind, whether it's a figure or a qualitative measure, and do walk away. Much as we pray that there is agreement and consensus at the end of a negotiation, some outcomes are not worth it. So before you enter a negotiation, know your point of no return and decide in advance when you will walk away from the negotiation. A lot of this we teach and train because there's no one size fits all. But let us go back, because this series we are simplifying and demystifying alternative dispute resolution as a whole. We go back to what we've been talking about over the course of the teachings. We have mediation. At the start, we have the dispute avoidance mechanisms, as earlier discussed in the previous videos. When you do have a mediation and you have a third party facilitating a negotiated negotiation, that is now bordering mediation. Remember, the first one has been a neutral third party, or just parties that have an issue to resolve, sitting amongst themselves and agreeing on the best course of action, each knowing their position, but most importantly, their interests. We have talked about the difference between positions and interests, and we know that in dispute resolution as a whole, more so in negotiations, what you see on the face value is usually not the real reason for the dispute. So as a skilled ADR specialist, we are in position to read behind the lines and understand or get the other parties to reveal what the real intention is. So quickly, about the discerning the real intentions, positions versus interests, we get into the space where we have mediation and negotiations, where negotiations is a part of another process. Case in point, you as parties have agreed to mediate maybe a merger and an acquisition. And in the process, you have agreed on most of the things, maybe except the money, the price points. At that point, one party has, say, a 9-figure value in mind, and the other party has, say, a 5-figure value in mind. But remember, neither party knows where the other party's ZOPA is. A skilled mediator at this point takes off their mediator hat and goes into their negotiation hat and does the brackets, what is called bracketing, to get the parties within the confines of ethics of mediation to see what exactly it is, because typically the negotiating parties have a range, especially when it comes to numbers and figures. The 9-figure might be an ultimate best deal, but somewhere in between 9 and 6, the parties are happy to settle. Again, somewhere in between the 9 and the 6-figure range is their partner. On the other hand, the one who is settling for a 5-figure may secretly hold the hope that at the right time they will move along and move the discussion into the 6-7-figure discussion, which in reality is their partner. That brings us to the negotiation techniques I mentioned earlier. We have several to choose from. You have the most obvious one, which is the time bomb. You tell someone this offer is valid today. It's all or nothing. I will not go into details in that because most of us use it, and we've experienced maybe sales people who tell us the offer is valid today. After 24 hours, we're back to the original price. We do have the good cop, bad cop, where you have a negotiation team and one person is acting extremely cruel and crass and the other party is appearing to be the understanding one. This is a psychology of negotiations to get the other party to feel like somewhere in between the good and the bad cop, is their solution. We do have expand the pie as another technique. You can expand the pie, especially once you know that beyond the position or the stated monies, there is another interest, sometimes non-monetary, that we can guide you on and teach you on to expand the pie. Interestingly, the schools of thought about expanding the pie are many, and for the constraint of time, we could talk about, do you expand the pie or do you just capture the whole pie? I'm curious to know, if you were the negotiator, would you expand the pie or would you capture the whole pie? The other strategies are the add-ons, where you ask for one thing just to get to the other party to get a feel of where they are in terms of consensus. Then you add on incrementally and add on. You tell this dealer in China that I want to export or I want to import, say 1,000 tons of, let's say, skincare products. And then you negotiate the price based on the product. Then you say, oh, but if I pay you maybe 80% upfront, can you package it for me and label it for me? Then after packaging and labeling it, can you add an extra variety, maybe of soaps? You see, we are expanding the pie in a clever way. And because we are offering something and not just making demands, the supplier might just accept. In that way, the negotiation is making savings because you have given a trade-off of either an early advance payment or a lump sum that the other party wasn't explaining. And on and on and on go the strategies. Some of them, like we've talked about, the strategy of silence in the beginning. Strategically timed silence in a negotiation is fine as gold. Sometimes by just keeping quiet long enough, you get the other party to panic and make an offer that they were not intending to give up so soon. So, as you can tell, that negotiation is a very wide and interesting discussion, but most importantly, it's a strategic tool. When we come to business, understanding how to negotiate is not just a strategy or a skill, it is survival. This is when we move the margins without expanding capital. This is when we leverage trust and relationships. This is where we start to see a build of confidence, not just in the teams, but in our business models, way before dispute arises. I would like to tell you more about negotiations, but this cannot happen in this video. So I want to invite you over. Come over to the ADR Center. Our website and details are below this video. Let's handhold you. Let's talk to your teams. Let's empower you as individuals, as corporations, so that when you negotiate, way before conflict arises, you structure deals and you just don't close deals. Most importantly, we want to give you an opportunity and pathways to avoid the tail end of dispute resolution so that you can retain a degree of power and control as far as business dealings is concerned. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you in the next videos. Better still, when you log in and say hello to us at the ADR Center.